All right, everybody. Hello and welcome back to Called to Broadcast. Unfortunately, this week I am not helped by Will. He is unfortunately not able to make it to the podcast recording session this week. However, I have some excellent stuff planned for you all. I noticed lately that a lot of my fellow Zoomers have a difficulty with the dating scene. And I know that's not a lately problem, but I think it's become increasingly prevalent as the Zoomers age, and the older Zoomers start to feel like they're losing their way in life because they haven't found a partner yet. But I think today is a good day to sit down and talk about something very positive. And that is the wonderful, amazing concept of love and having a partner and understanding how to navigate these relationships and be a proper partner to your significant other, whether that be your husband or wife, boyfriend or girlfriend. All of these fields are difficult to navigate, and a healthy dose of advice should always be used. Now, I would just like to preface this with I am not speaking from a single perspective. So if you're coming here to listen to someone complain about the Zoomer dating scene, I am not going to be that guy. I am here to make sure that those who are single get a nice amount of advice from someone that isn't, so that they can break into the dating world and hopefully find someone to spend the rest of their life with. So, like I said before, 21st century dating, especially now that the Zoomers are getting towards the middle of their 20s, it's a mess. It really is a mess. So we really need to focus on how to fix this. So the main two things I'm going to focus on in this episode is that I want you guys to come out of this understanding how you should treat your partner and why you should treat your partner that way. You'll see what I mean by that towards the end, but I'm going to go ahead and give you all of the theology behind marriage and behind love, and also some advice on how to actually enter into that world, as I know a lot of you are on the outskirts and you're finding it difficult to even break inward. So I'm going to tell you what you should do first, because I think that's the most important thing to understand is here's a list of things that you need to do in order to have a successful relationship. And if you don't do these things, you are going to slip down the slippery slope of abuse and of neglect of your partner. And those are things that typically break relationships and make them unrepairable. So the first thing you need to do is put God at the center of your relationship. I know this is going to sound like I'm trying to make religion the most important part of your life right off the bat, and I know some of you are not necessarily going to be religious. But what I mean by this is that we have one Creator, and that Creator gave us all these gifts, including the ones that you get to partake in when you introduce yourself into a relationship. So when you're looking at your life and you're looking at how to navigate these relationships, you need to look at God and how He navigates yours. Because God created you out of love. God created you because He wants to love you and He wants to have a relationship with you and He wants to spend eternity with you. So look at your relationships like that. You want to spend eternity with this person. If you want to spend eternity with this person, the rest of your life with this person, then you want to treat them as you would yourself. Because you wouldn't want to live 80 years with yourself where you're abusing your partner, you're neglecting your partner, you're not giving them what they ought to be given. You would hate that just as much as they're going to hate that. So keep those two things at the center of your relationship. Treat your partner as God treats you, and treat your partner as you would yourself. All three of these things should be the same, given that you're navigating these relationships properly. Thirdly, do not use your partner. And what I mean by using your partner is you do not want to use your partner for a means to an end. So therefore, do not enter into a relationship if you're only looking for sex, or if you're only looking for someone to not make you feel lonely. Because first off, you're not going to feel not lonely just because there's someone else next to you. The only thing that's going to make you feel not lonely is you orienting your life towards social activity. And that is difficult, especially if you haven't learned how to do those things yet. So we'll touch on more on that later. Fourth, you need to stop abusing pornography and you need to stop masturbating. Those two things are extremely prevalent in today's society. And I know we've touched on them in previous episodes, but those two things really destroy your sense of your self-worth and the worth of others, because you're using yourself for sexual pleasure, and you're using other people to view their sexual activity in order to facilitate that sexual pleasure. So not only are you using yourself, you're also using those poor strangers. So stop masturbating, stop abusing pornography, because just as you wouldn't use your partner for a means to an end for sexual activity, you don't want to use yourself for a means to an end for sexual activity, and you don't want to use other people for a means to an end for sexual activity. Fifth, you want to understand what a man is and what a woman is. And I'm not saying that to throw you into some defined gender roles. Those are important, but this isn't what the main focus of today is. You need to understand that a man is someone with a penis, someone with XY chromosomes, and someone that is going to orient themselves towards protection and facilitating creation. Those are the central facets of a man. What a woman is someone that has a vagina, someone that has XX chromosomes, and someone that nurtures creation. Men and women are extremely synergistic. There's a reason they were created equal and opposite. It's because a man and a woman serve the same function. However, they do it through two very distinct ways. A man creates, a man leads the household, a man leads others, a woman nurtures the household, keeps it together, and helps others lead. You need to mature together as well. This is, I think, one of the most important things when it comes to a relationship, is a lot of people will have their own spiritual growth and they'll neglect to bring their partner on that journey with them. If you discover some new amazing information, you need to share that with your partner. Your partner needs to know it just as much as you, because if you guys are going to share your lives together, you have to mature together. And maturing is naturally how you're going to have a successful life. So mature with your partner, teach your partner. If you learn something from this video and you take something away from what I'm telling you right now, run to your partner, tell them about it, get excited about it, and nurture each other's maturity. Next, you want to get married as soon as you can. All right, stop putting it off. If you two love each other, if you two respect each other, get married. All right? It's as simple as that. You don't have to worry about fornication if you're already married. That's all I can say. Get married. Next, you want to seek help from an outside trusted source that doesn't have ulterior motives. Your friends are going to have ulterior motives. It's as simple as that. Your friends want what's best for you. That is absolutely true. If it's a true friend, they want what's best for you. However, your friend is also going to orient themselves towards bias with you rather than looking at your relationship as a pair. Because when you are married, you are two in one flesh. You are now coalesced into one being. There's no separating that. Your friends need to understand that. In order for them to understand that, they need to be able to help you two together. So that's what you want to look for in someone that is a trusted source. Very common trusted sources are going to be your priest or even a Christian therapist. I would honestly not recommend anything outside of a Christian worldview, because that's when you get into territory where you get a lot of advice that is very nebulous to the concepts I'm going to talk about today, but they don't get to the point. They just beg the question over and over again. So keep it salient, keep it to the point. You know what you need. So make sure that whoever is giving you that advice also knows what you need. And lastly, but certainly not least, you need to pray together. Prayer is a great time for introspective thought and for building your relationship with God. And as we know, marriage is a sacrament, so you want this relationship to be oriented towards God and with God. God is going to help you with this marriage, all right? He wants what's best for you, and he wants what's best for your marriage. So if you pray together, you can pray upon your problems to God, and you can make it through even better on the other side of that prayer. So every morning or every night, particularly in the morning, is better because at night you tend to fall asleep while you're praying. Don't ask me how I know that. But in the morning, I think it's a good idea to sit down with your partner and pray together. So this is all of the stuff that you should do, all of the things that you need to do in order to orient your relationship towards good and orient your relationship towards a sacramental way of living. Now, the difficult thing is, and I know this is the entry point, is actually being able to get into a relationship and be able to get married. And this is not a simple thing to really solve, honestly. Getting a partner is more difficult than a lot of people that are in relationships give it credit for, because we become complacent and then we don't know how to give advice to other people on relationships. So the first thing you need to do whenever you're looking for a relationship is you need to assess where you are with your social ability. And what I mean by that is everyone is on a different level of emotional maturity as well as social maturity. If you don't even know how to shake someone's hand, you're going to have a difficult time finding a partner. And it's not that those two concepts directly coincide. It's that if you feel uncomfortable interacting, you as a man, if you feel uncomfortable interacting with other men in an authoritative way, you're going to have difficulty interacting with women too. So you need to know where you're at with your social ability. So I'm going to go over a few points of social ability, and then I'm going to go over a few ways to bring yourself to the next level. So at the very bottom, the lowest level of social adjustment, you're going to have those that have difficulty shaking hands, making eye contact, or even talking to the bagger at the grocery store. I guess there's not really baggers at grocery stores anymore, though. So here's a better idea. Gas station clerk. I'm pretty sure most gas stations still have those. If you have difficulty doing any of those things, you're going to have difficulty talking to women, and that's straight up just a fact. You're going to run into awkwardness, and you're going to feel inadequate. So what you need to do is, with someone you trust, practice those social interactions. Don't just walk in the door and say, "Hi, Mom," "Hi, brother/sister," and walk past and never talk to them again. Ask them for help. They are there. Family is there to help you. They're there to help you learn how to socialize. Walk in the door every day, shake your dad's hand, hug your mom, talk to your brother or sister. Do exercises in order for you to be able to build up those social skills. Because if they become habit with those that are close to you, they're going to become habit with those that aren't. You also need to, that's the first and foremost. But the second, I would say the second most important thing is you need to prepare for failure, and you need to have proper coping mechanisms for failure. A lot of people don't even engage in social life because they're afraid of failure. They're afraid of the pushback from those social interactions, which are extremely common. They're scary. They're uncomfortable. I get that. But they're also a necessary part of life because your mistakes teach you how to socialize more effectively. You know, if your toddler goes up to someone and screams a cuss word at them and they're off-put by that, that toddler is probably going to learn that's not the best way to do it. If a baby can learn these social mechanisms, then you can too. So if you fail in a situation, you're typically going to have the urge to offload that failure in some way that makes you forget about it, or at least allows you to decompress the trauma in some way. And what I mean by that is a healthy coping mechanism, for example, would be journaling. Journaling is a great way to express your thoughts in a way that won't harm others, even if they're offensive thoughts, because obviously desires are not a sin. So if you want to have an offensive desire and you need to express that offensive desire in a way that doesn't harm other people, do it in a journal. It's a great way to do it. You also will often see people do unhealthy things to cope with these kinds of failure. And one of the primary ways is masturbation. Masturbation is a really easy way to avoid the culpability of sociability. Because whenever you engage in these kinds of things, social interactions in general, you have to actually put your own personality into the mix. But when masturbation comes into play, you can forget about all that. You absorb yourself in someone else's interaction, and you pleasure yourself through that interaction, and that allows you to disassociate from reality. So don't disassociate. That's a really bad way to do it. Another way to do it is actually to neglect your body in favor of a temporary relief of this stress. And that would be overeating would be a good way to, a horrible way to do that. Don't do this. But it's a good example of those types of coping mechanisms. So find coping mechanisms that allow you to offload your stress and your anxiety in a way that does not harm other people and in a way that does not harm your own spiritual being. Those are two important facets to remember. My highest recommendations for these would be journaling. Video games are a great way, especially for the Zoomers. I know it helps me a lot whenever I'm in stressful situations. It's easy for me to grab a game and get absorbed in a story. And oftentimes those stories can give us lessons on how to actually deal with these situations. So stories are fantastic for learning these coping mechanisms. Now, another thing to keep in mind with social interaction is that you are never too inept. You will always be able to learn these social interactions. Social ability is a learned skill. It is not something that is self-evident in humanity, and it is not something that you are going to learn just by diffusion. You have to practice it. So you can always learn these things with someone close to you. You are never too inept. Do not give up just because you feel inadequate temporarily. You can always overcome that hump. And ultimately, all of these things, I've already told you 3 ways to improve your ability to actually socialize, which is the first step to getting into these kinds of relationships. You need to know that all of these things ultimately improve your view of yourself and your view of others. If you are able to build these social abilities, you're going to feel more confident in yourself. And if you feel more confident in yourself and you're able to express these social abilities to others, you're ultimately going to have more positive interactions with others, and then you're going to feel more positive towards other people that you interact with. So again, practice these social interactions, get out of your computer chair, get off the internet, stop using the internet to fulfill your social desires, and actually fulfill those social desires in real life. That's the only way you're going to learn. Now, on to the part where you're actually interacting with relationships. This is the part where you already got that social interaction down. This is the part where you've got the handshakes down. You've got the talking down. You've got the approach down. Now you need to be able to sustain those relationships. That's the second tier of social ability. Yes, you can walk up to the gas station clerk once, and you can say, "Hi, how's your day?" But it's another thing to engage further than that and deepen that relationship. That's tier 2. So this is how you're actually going to build relationships, is you have those consistent interactions with them, and over time, you become more familiar with the other person, and therefore you're going to be able to engage in a real relationship with them, getting their number, getting their Snapchat, talking to them outside of that one location that you see them on a weekly basis. That is going to be tier 2. That one is going to come so naturally after you get tier 1 down that it's not even really worth it for me to elaborate on. So I'm going to move on to tier 3. Tier 3 is when you're going to make these relationships committed relationships. And I'm not talking about love or romantic relationships right now. I'm strictly talking about friendship and even close friendship or even familiar relations. This level is when you're going to be able to actually engage in meaningful dialogue with these people consistently, at least on a weekly basis. This is where you're asking them about themselves. You're learning more about them, and you're offering your own lived experiences into their lives so that you can exchange these experiences with each other, because that's what a relationship is. This is tier 3. In order to actually engage with tier 3, you have to have tier 2 down with many people. You have to have tier 2 practiced. So in order to engage in that tier 3, what I recommend that you do is go ahead and talk to your friends and ask them to introduce you to other people and practice that tier 3. And I'm not telling you to take on the undue burden of too many friendships. Acquaintanceships are just as powerful, and they take the same entry as a friendship does. So now let's move on to the actual part that I think most of you are going to be here for, and that's love. Love is going to be the I was going to go in the wrong direction with that one, so let's rewind. Simply put, by Thomas Aquinas, love is to will the good of the other person. So love doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic love. This is going to be any love in which you are nurturing someone else. This could be friendships, this could be family, this could be relationships with a significant other. This could even be strangers. Simply put, love is to will the good of the other. And in order to will the good of another person, you have to understand what good is. So what is good? What is evil, even? Good is one of the primary ideas in philosophy and theology that people battle with all the time, but I can tell you right now that it's actually so basic that most people overanalyze what good is. It can't be strictly defined, but it can be understood through God himself. In Genesis, when God looked at his creations on the seventh day and said, it was good, what he meant is that it is working as he intended it to. It is functioning properly. And we would say that anything functioning properly is absolutely good. And what I mean by functioning properly is it's oriented towards the purpose it was created for, the purpose that God created it for. Our desires, such as sexual desires, if they are misplaced, they are naturally going to be perversions of what they were created for. For example, sex was created for procreation and for a husband and a wife to love each other. That's what sex was created for. If we can naturally pervert that in a million different ways, and we'll go over that in a moment. But when we do these perversions, we bring it away from a good and we pervert it to an evil. And naturally, the most good things can also be the most evil. So good is simply put a desire that is oriented towards their purpose. So when you're thinking about that, always make sure that your desires, when you put them into action, are oriented towards good and not evil. They are oriented towards their purpose. So do not abuse the goods that you have in your life, as that will lead to evil very quickly. This also begs the question, especially in the realm of sexual immorality, what is considered a mortal sin and what is considered a venial sin? This is a very common question that a lot of people battle with, especially when they're coming into the faith. So those of you that aren't in the faith, this is a very important distinction to have before you come in. A mortal sin is a damnable sin. It is a sin that is going to cause you to destine yourself for hell. I've said this in previous podcast episodes. You do not get sent to hell by God. You send yourself to hell. When you go to hell, that is you turning away from God, turning away from an eternity with him, and having an eternity separated from him. That is what hell is. So, if you turn from God, if you sin against God through mortal sin, you are naturally going to be damned because you are damning yourself by choosing to be away from God. Whenever you choose a mortal sin, whenever you say that this mortal sin is where you want to be, you are saying to God, I don't need you. You are saying to God, your rules don't matter to me. These mortal sins are what are going to damn you. Now, mortal sins are bad. Go to confession for mortal sins. Do not do mortal sins if you can avoid them, and you can always avoid them. But trust me, everyone's going to do them anyway. It's not easy to avoid them. Not all sins are damnable, necessarily, but all sins are offensive to God. And what I mean by that is venial sins, such as ones that are not gravely immoral, but they are still perversions of immorality. They are still offensive to God, but they aren't necessarily going to cause you to damn yourself. It's very easy to feel extremely guilty for a mortal sin. It's very easy to turn away from God when you partake in a mortal sin. But sometimes we partake in sins that aren't necessarily damnable or aren't necessarily morally apprehensive. Sometimes we partake in sins that feel light and feel harmless, but aren't necessarily harmless in the long run. For example, your neighbor is annoying, and you silently wish that he stubs his toe. That is an effectively harmless thing, but it's definitely not going to help if you continue to think that way on a consistent basis. Naturally, that is going to lead towards a mortal sin when you start hating people, when you let those annoyances build up and turn into hate. That's when it becomes a mortal sin. So all of these things go to say that there are many ways to naturally align yourself towards God and naturally align yourself towards the benefits of relationships and the benefits of marriage, but there are even more ways to mess that up and to pervert it and to turn it away from God. And in relationships and in marriage, it's very easy to do this. So marriage especially, we can look at the definition of marriage to understand what it is better, and then we're going to go over some of the ways that you can pervert marriage. So marriage is the matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of whole of life. This, in essence, means that a man and a woman are sharing themselves in their entirety, in their whole of life together. This is going to be ordered towards the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. And this is in the Catechism's 1601. So if you need an extended definition or a better reading on it, go ahead and read that. There's a lot more in there than what I just stated. But that very simple definition tells you that marriage was made for man, for woman, and it was made oriented towards the procreation and education of offspring. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't more benefits to marriage than just children. That doesn't mean that children are the only thing that come out of marriage. In fact, there's many more goods that come out of marriage. When you grow with someone else, you are naturally going to help that person orient themselves towards good, the definition of love, and therefore you're both going to come out on the other side better for it. So, if this is the definition of marriage, marriage is oriented towards good, and marriage is oriented towards the betterment of man and woman, and it's oriented towards the procreation, education, and betterment of children, then naturally there's going to be a lot of ways to mess that up, a lot of ways to pervert that. And we see so many of those in today's society. And the reason I'm telling you these is because these are all the things you need to avoid at all costs. If you don't avoid these, you are going to use other people. You are going to abuse other people. You are going to neglect your partner. And like I said before, you can't neglect your partner. You can't abuse your partner. If you do that, that will end your relationship faster than anything else. And most relationships aren't built on the best things ever. They're built on avoiding the worst things because you can build the better later. So the sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery, is the commandment that really that is really the emphasis of marriage. It emphasizes that marriage is so sacramentally important that there's a million things you can do to mess it up. The first one and the foremost is divorce. Obviously, marriages aren't always easy. Marriages aren't always going to be sunshine and rainbows. You're going to run into problems. You're going to run into arguments. You're going to get at each other's throats. That is natural. However, you cannot get divorced. You can get an annulment, but you cannot get divorced. Divorce is simply not possible. If you go by the definition of marriage, that a man and a woman share the same flesh and share the same whole life, naturally that is going to be inseparable. That is not something you can suddenly just break. So if you get divorced, you are naturally going to be committing adultery because there is no such thing as a separation of a marriage. So if you go and find a new person to spend your life with, you are naturally committing adultery, which we can go into the next one, adultery. Adultery is when you have sex outside of your marriage. And that doesn't mean it has to be sexual intercourse necessarily. It could be nebulous sexual relationships as well. That could be romantic investment. That could be looking at someone else with lust. These are all ways to commit adultery. You don't want to commit any of these things because it weakens your marriage. The next thing is going to be fornication, and this isn't necessarily inside of marriage, obviously, because you can't fornicate when you're married. But fornication is obviously sex before marriage, very simply put. It is a grave sin, and the reason it's a grave sin is, again, because of what we said before. Sex is made for marriage. Marriage naturally allows sex to be sacramental, and that is where the desire should be oriented. If you are having sex outside of marriage, you are perverting that desire, disorienting that desire, and bringing it away from its original purpose. Therefore, you don't want to fornicate. And I understand the desire to fornicate, and I think this is one of the things that Generation Z really struggles with. Well, everyone for all of time has struggled with this, but fornication is so common and so encouraged nowadays that it's gotten to the point where it's easy to view this act as allowable. But what you're doing when you commit this kind of thing is you're using the other person, because you're bringing the desire outside of marriage. And not only are you bringing the desire outside of marriage, you are actively engaging in something that you don't intend to fruit a child. You're engaging in it strictly for pleasure outside of its original purpose. That is very clearly, by definition, a grave sin, a mortal sin. You are using your partner as an object of lust. And that is, again, using your partner. You do not want to use your partner for an end, ever. You do not want to use them for sexual pleasure. That full stop. You do not want to use your partner for sexual pleasure. You can partake in sexual pleasure together in marriage, but your partner is not there to satisfy you. That is not the point of a relationship. The point of a relationship is to will the good of each other, to help each other grow, to help each other mature. The reason I want to emphasize this one so much is because, like I said before, people dismiss it a lot. And people will call you weird for trying to avoid this, and people will judge you just for trying to save yourself until marriage. And I'm going to tell every single one of you right now, if you are still a virgin, if you are still waiting to find the right person, waiting for marriage, you are so far ahead of everyone else, and that is wonderful. Keep that held close, and you will have a wonderful, fruitful relationship. Because if you only ever have sex with one person, trust me, it's going to be amazing. The next one is going to go back to what I said before in the very beginning of this episode, where I said, what should you do? You should stop masturbating. You should not stop using pornography. We're going to go back to that. Pornography is, again, a display of sexual acts on a screen. It could be real people. It could be drawn. It could be animated. It doesn't matter. It is utilizing a display of intimacy. And oftentimes that display of intimacy abuses the sexual facilities of someone else. And therefore, you are going to have a perverted view of what sexual acts should be. And not only that, but pornography as a whole industry is extremely damaging to society. We are commodifying women in such a way that really damages their psyche and damages young women looking at these women and misunderstanding what it is to be successful, what it is to be virtuous. It's extremely damaging. Just don't use it. In fact, you should be avidly fighting against it at every turn in your life, because it really does destroy women and it does destroy children. It's extremely disgusting. There's a few more things here. I'm just going to hammer through these quick because these aren't as necessary to really hammer on, especially in this kind of an episode. But avoid prostitution. Don't pay people for sex. Again, that's adultery or fornication. Don't do it. Don't rape. Don't commit homosexual acts. Don't commit incest. Don't masturbate. All of those things are tangential to the points I just laid out beforehand. All of these things will detract from a relationship. All of these things will cause you to use people. So, all of these things lead us to one natural conclusion. And that is, A relationship, love between two people in a romantic fashion, is oriented to lead you into marriage. And that's why I said at the very beginning, get married as fast as you can. Get married ASAP. There's really no point in waiting. If you find the right person, if you two are oriented towards the good of each other, there is no point in waiting. Do not let people try to persuade you out of your relationship just because they're worried you're moving a little bit too quickly. You will know when you find the person you need, and you will know when you find the person that needs you. It's that simple. Orient your life towards God. Orient your life towards loving yourself and others. Don't use other people. Stop masturbating. Stop abusing pornography. Understand what a man and woman is and why they are opposite and equal. Read Genesis. You need to mature together. Teach each other. You need to get help from an outside trusted source that doesn't have ulterior motives, and you need to pray together. If you do all of these things, you will have a successful relationship. If you don't have a relationship yet, you need to find out where you are with your social ability. You need to find out if you're at the very bottom, you can't even shake a hand, you can't even make a conversation with the clerk. You need to figure out if you're at the level where you can make those conversations, you can facilitate those social interactions, but you haven't been able to establish relationships just yet. And then you also need to find out if you're already there, if you already have relationships, if you're already so close to finding the person you want to spend your life with. You just got to reach that extra step. You need to prepare for failure. You need to practice social interaction. Know that you are not too inept. You can always learn. You need to find a partner that will ultimately improve you and improve themselves. You need to ask your friends for help. You need to surround yourself with people that have your best interests in mind. And you need to stop relying on the internet to fill your social desires. The internet is not a replacement for real life. It never will be, it never has been, and it's only going to damage you if you live online. So, that all to say, I hope that this video has given you guys some advice and some, hopefully positive advice on how to actually navigate these relationships. And if you have any questions or any comments on this video, please leave them down below. I will try my best to navigate and respond to all of them. So, this has been Called to Broadcast, Episode 5. Thank you all very much for listening, and I will see you again next week.